Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to this month's Connect with Control M. Today, we'll be discussing how workload policies can help you manage Control M. My name is Eric Epperson, and I'm a technical support analyst at BMC Software based in Houston, and I support the Control M products for distributed systems in the Americas. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce today's panelists, Ted Levitt and Melvin Abraham. If you have any questions at any time during this presentation, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A panel and we'll cover them at the end of the session. If you wish to save today's presentation, you can do so by going to File and save it as a PDF. Today's agenda: we'll start with an overview of workload policies, review defining user authorizations, demonstrate several business use cases, present some useful information, and finish with the live question and answer session. What can workload policies do for you? Workload policies provide a way to have more control over parts or the whole of your Control M workflows by defining them to affect jobs by Control M server, assign quantitative resources, or host. For several criteria, specific times and dates can be set for policies to take effect. For instance, if there's a planned maintenance for an agent and you need to make sure no jobs are running at that time, a workload policy can keep jobs from running on that agent or even submit them to another agent. When defining policies, they can be set to be either active or inactive. This status can be changed using the Enterprise Manager CLI utility, which is useful for batch operations, allowing greater automated management of your Control M environment. There are several places in the Workload Automation GUI client for managing workload policies. The first is the Workload Policies Definitions window. This is where policies can be created, deleted, and modified. Most options have drop-down menus for ease of use. This is where they are also activated and deactivated. We'll show more details of working in this console in the demo portion of this session. The other place in the GUI client for managing this feature is the Workload Policies Monitor window. Here, the status of active policies can be reviewed. There's an Open into Viewpoint button, which opens an All Jobs viewpoint, so you may conveniently check the status of jobs. An important part of managing workload policies is granting users proper authorizations. This is done in the Control M Configuration Manager. We'll move into our live environment in a second and we'll discuss authorizations further. Here we are in the Configuration Manager, and to access authorizations for workload policies, we'll go to Security, Authorizations, and we can access either users or groups. Open the Properties. As we can see, there's a Workload Policies tab. And here in this tab, we can create, modify, or delete rules for users or groups regarding workload policies. Opening the Properties, we can see that we can change access level, and Workload Policy field is where we can define what workload policy these authorizations apply to. So for access level, we have Browse, which allows the user to only view details of the policy. Update will allow changes to be made to existing policies, but cannot create or delete policies. Full privileges allow users to do all actions, including create and delete. In the workload policy field, the wildcard asterisk may be used. Now we're going to move to the workload automation GUI client, and we're going to review the workload policies definitions window. It can be accessed through the tools domain, production control. Now, here we can see that we can create new policies, duplicate, delete, activate, deactivate. There's also a button for refreshing, and a button to move into the workload policies monitor. We'll demonstrate this in a moment. Now, selecting a policy, we can see here that its details are shown on the right-hand side. We have the name. Once a policy is created, the name cannot be changed, and there is a limit of 20 characters for this field. You can place a brief description, which appears here on the left as well. Under General, you can set the state or status, same as the buttons above. It'll also show the last time and by whom the policy was updated. Here in Filter is where the criteria for what jobs the policy will affect are set. So we have job name, which is also known as MIM name. The wildcard character asterisk can be used in this field. We also have Control M server. And here we can see that we do have drop-down fields by application, sub-application, folder, job type, and host or host group, which includes Control M agents, defined host groups, or remote agents. The next fields, quantitative resources, running jobs, and host mapping. Here, let's close those and then open here. Actually, we'll go down to running jobs. These fields define what changes the policy will affect to the jobs that meet the criteria that were defined in Filter. We can see this policy has a criteria for number of running jobs set, and we have buttons to create new actions, duplicate the actions. Details lets us view the details and modify them. We can change the order of operations or delete the actions. Looking in details, we can see it opens a window where we can define the Control M server, the number of running jobs, and we have many options for setting dates and times for when an active policy will take effect. So we have all days and all hours. Moving to every periodic day of the week, we can see that we can make policies effective for certain days of the week, in either all hours or between certain times during these days of the week. We'll have between specific date and time, so that we can set days according to a calendar with a start date and an end time and date. Between specific days in calendar allows us to define a date range, and then for all hours between that date range or certain times on those days in that range. We have every week between, day of weeks and times. So a day of the week to start at a time and a day of the week to end at a time. And on specific days in calendar, that allows us to select a date and to define times between on those dates or all hours on those dates. And we don't want to save the changes that we're making. Now, as we can see here, we have several policies already defined for common scenarios. The first we'll demonstrate is to stop all jobs that are running on a Control-M server. This is very useful for when you have maintenance periods on a Control-M server and you need to stop all jobs on that server. We'll move to the monitoring domain. And here you can see we have a workflow that will be running on the Control-M server. And we're informed that we'll need to stop those jobs for maintenance. So we'll go ahead and start this workflow. And then moving back to Workload Policies definitions, we will activate. Yes, we want to activate and apply our changes. Moving to Workload Policies Monitor window, we can see that this policy is now active and that there's one running job that is applied to it currently. Moving back to the monitoring domain, we can see that the workflow has, the jobs in this workflow have now changed to a waiting status. And if we go to waiting info, we can see the job belongs to workload policy that has reached its limit for number of executing jobs. Now, we're informed that the maintenance period is done and we can continue running jobs. We can go back to Workload Policies definition window, deactivate the job. Yes, we want to deactivate it. And if we move to the monitor and refresh, as we can see here, there is a orange triangle with an exclamation point in the definitions window. This means we need to apply our changes. So we'll apply our changes, move back to the policies monitor, and refresh, and we can see that the policy is no longer active. Moving back to the monitoring domain, we can see that our workflow has continued to run, and there's no longer any waiting info, and it's finishing successfully. Another useful feature of policies is to limit by the number of quantitative resources that are available. Here we have a workflow that if we were to run it now, all the jobs would run at the same time. But we know this host is very busy at certain times. And we still want jobs to run there, but we don't want more than one job to run at a time. Well, moving back to the Workload Policies definitions window, we have this policy. As we can see, it has an action that is defined to affect the quantity. Oh, actually, let me cancel that. Let me select it and go to details so that every day of the week, Monday through Friday, between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., we know this host is very busy and we want to limit the number of jobs that are running on it. So cancel that. We'll go ahead and activate the policy. Yes, we want to activate it. Make sure to apply our changes. Moving to the monitor, we'll refresh and we can see it's now active. Going to the monitoring domain, we'll go ahead, hold these jobs, There we go. Now they're held. We'll rerun them. And we'll free them. And as we can see, these jobs start running one at a time. And if we go to the waiting info, we can see this job belongs to a workload policy that has reached its limits for using resource, the quantitative resource that's been defined, and the needed and how many are available. And we can see this workload policy, or this workflow, completed successfully running one job at a time on that host. One of the most powerful features of policies is host mapping. Here we have a workflow for jobs to run on a certain remote host. Now, we've just been informed that this remote host is going to be part of a relocation of a data center, and it will be unavailable for some time. Now, we could use find an update or other method for changing all the job definitions to run on a new host. Or we can use a workload policy for host mapping. Let's move to Workload Policies Definitions window. And we have this policy here. Close these just for a little more clarity. And here we can see in host mapping, we have options to have a drop down for the Control-M server. And here's the remote host those jobs are running on. And here we have available field for either agents, host group, or remote host that we want those jobs to run on after activating the policy. Now, as we mentioned earlier, workload policies can be activated and inactivated using the Enterprise Manager CLI utility, which we have here an example of the usage. So CLI, give it the username, password, the Control-M server host that we want this policy to affect, the workload_activate flag, the name of the policy, and why will activate the policy. There's also in to deactivate the policy. Now, to schedule running this command, we have here a job. You open it up. Here we go in the properties. We can see that we're using CLI and the command line OS job. It's the same command. I do want to mention if this is running on an Enterprise Manager server on Unix or Linux, you'll need to preference this with an EM. One other consideration is that when using the CLI utility in a job, even if it is successful, the job will end not okay. So we need to set an undo action for a specific statement output. And when we receive the message successfully in this job, it'll set the job to OK. So we'll move back to the monitoring domain. And here we have those jobs to run on that remote host that will be part of the relocation. If I free this first job now, we can see it starts to execute and that it was submitted to the original remote host and finishes successfully. Now, we'll go ahead and free this job that will run the CLI command that will activate the workload policy. So we can schedule it for when we know the relocation is going to happen. It runs. And And looking in the log, we can see it ended okay. And here's what the output of the successful run of the command shows. We can go to the Workload Policies monitor screen. No, I don't want to apply those changes. We can see that it shows that this policy is active here. We can also look in the monitor field and see that it is active here. Now, moving back to the monitoring domain, we'll free this job flow. It successfully runs. And when we move to the log, we can see the messages host group has been changed due to mapping policy of workload and the name of the policy. It's a member of the following workloads, and the host group has been changed, and it ended okay on the new remote host. And of course, we could create a new job to schedule when the relocation is done to then deactivate this policy. Mentioned some very useful considerations when using host mapping the workload policy. We're going to move back to the slideshow, and I'll provide some other useful information. When you're using agent host mapping and the Control-M server is at version 8, Fixpack 2 or lower, pre-new day needs to be disabled on the Control-M server. Otherwise, jobs ordered by new day will be ordered to the original agent. BMC support highly recommends the latest fix packs to be installed. You can see the listed knowledge article on the slide to get further details. Now, if you have a job, it belongs to 2 or more workload policies. There's an and relationship between those policies. All policies have to allow the job to run for it to run. Critical jobs do not get stopped from running by workload policies. For example, if there's a policy that limits running jobs to 10, and an 11th job is defined as critical, that job will be run. Now, specific dates and times that can be set to apply by number of running jobs or quantitative resources for a workload policy are applied according to the O date of the Control-M server, not by the calendar date. That will need to be taken in consideration when creating and modifying workload policies. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to attend. I hope the information provided was useful.